January 31st, 2024, we packed up everything and we moved out of the United States. And it's been a roller coaster. We've had moments of excitement, but sometimes moments of loneliness when you don't understand the culture or the people the way you would like in your new home. This is going to be a great video. This one is called How I See the U.S. After Living in Europe for 2 years, and this is by Dave in Portugal. Super curious to see how this lines up because we're in May right now, so that's almost 2.5 years. So it's just a little more than where he was when he made this video. So I can compare and see if I agree or if I disagree. If you like this kind of content, then please like the video. That really helps a lot. Let's see what we can see.
Almost 2 years ago, I took one of the biggest risks of my entire life.
Oh, I wanna feel something.
Oh, man.
I just wanna breathe again. Dive into the deep.
I sold everything I owned, told my family and friends goodbye, and started a new chapter in Europe, Portugal to be exact. Damn it. This is how I see the US after living in Europe for almost 2 years. And let's just say it changed me, but not in the way I thought it would. I'm going to be brutally honest and not going to hold back. Keep in mind, these are only my opinions and you can take it or leave it, simple as that. Ever since the first time I had visited Europe back in 2011, I knew that I wanted to move here at some point, gain some new perspective and introduce a new culture into my life. And what better place to do it than Europe?
Okay, so 2011 is when he first moved here. So, when he first visited. This video was made 2 years ago. So, which was 2024. So that means he moved here in like 2022. So he came almost 10 years before he actually moved here. We came 1 year before we moved here. The first time we ever left, I say this in the trailer on my channel, but the first time we ever left the United States was in February of 2023. If you can believe that. So it took him a little more time before he was actually able to leave. It took us about a year, actually less than a year, because it was January of 2024. So there you go.
Instead of 50 states, there's 50 different countries that speak completely different languages and all have diverse food and cultural backgrounds. So I'm going to start with the biggest difference that I found between United States and Europe, and that is the work-life balance.
Right.
Now, this is a big generalization because I know that there's countries in the European Union that work very hard and want everything to be perfect. Germany. But for the most part,
whoa. Leave Germany alone with my people. But yeah, work-life balance is something I definitely, in the beginning, it was a little difficult because I was still working for I was still working out of the US. So still had the same, long hours and everything. But the weekends weren't as busy. So I still had that for a little bit, but I haven't had it for a while. And the work-life balance really is a huge, difference maker, I believe.
It seems that one of the most important things to Europeans is their quality of life. There is this generalization that a lot of Europeans don't work as hard as Americans. And I don't think that's completely true. Many cafes and restaurants in Europe have the same owner from the start to finish. They never retire. They do the same thing with very exceptional quality until the day they die. And this isn't something that happens too often in the United States. This is one of the reasons.
I think that's true. I mean, I don't know. I'm in Spain where they work hard when they work. When they don't work, it's like they play hard. There you see a lot of families together. You see a lot of groups of people together. They just hang out and talk. And it's typically out. They don't go to homes a lot. At least that's my understanding. So I would say they still do work hard. I think what he's saying is true. I've seen a lot of, cafes that I go to where it's the owner and the owner's wife and a couple of employees, and they're there every day, like 7 days a week. So, they do work hard. I just think they play hard too, if that makes sense.
Reasons that I think in Europe,
That
the
looks
food
delicious.
quality generally tends to be a bit better, even the fast food. The European fast food tends to still have fresh ingredients if they aren't the franchises from America like McDonald's. You can't compete with a restaurant whose owner has been cooking the same dishes for 50 plus years. And it's pretty obvious when I speak to friends and family back in the United States that they kind of have this rushed agenda where they're trying to get as much done as they can throughout the day. And this was me included when I lived in the United States and I was working 12-hour days, sometimes 6 days a week. But I was missing out on some of the most important things like stopping and really listening to my friends and family. And I think that this is one of the most important things to most Europeans. I think this idea in the United States of having these big achievements and never being forgotten is something that's really important. However, in Europe, they have the right to be forgotten. There is actually a law in Europe that is the right to be forgotten. Now,
Wait. Hold up.
actually a law in
When does the right to be forgotten apply? Article 17 of the GDPR outlines the specific circumstances under which the right to be forgotten applies. An individual has a right to have their personal data erased if, I see what he's saying. The personal data is no longer necessary for the purpose an organization originally collected or processed it. Oh, okay. So they have the right to not get these lists. But that was an interesting way that he put it. I do want to hear that again.
never being forgotten is something that's really important. However, in Europe, they have the right to be forgotten. There is actually a law in Europe that is the right to be forgotten. Now, this is a foreign concept that I don't think Americans think about a lot. In Europe, if you've had an imperfect past, the European Union allows you to move past that. And this also means that in Europe, people have the right to have their personal data erased. Once the personal data is no longer necessary to the organization collecting it. While in the US, forcing removal of articles on the internet is impermissible under the First Amendment. Now, after living in Europe for almost 2 years, I have come to the conclusion that the United States is currently in a state of toxic extremism. It's not very common in Europe to hear people arguing about politics, blaming unrelated issues on opposing political parties or specific.
Toxic extremism. Damn. That's true. I mean, I'm not, it's true. It's just extremism. And right now it's at a whole different level than it ever has been. So, I mean, there's friends and family even who I do not talk to as much as I used to. Not saying I don't ever talk to them, but it's just really hard because everything at some point boils down to politics and your political view. And if you differ, it never used to be that way. There was a time I never used to ask. I mean, not ask, but it never entered your mind what somebody's political opinion was. But now, for me anyway, it's something that comes up. But I also have family members that have different political views than I do, and we get along fine, never talk about politics. So, but it definitely has caused some separation between friends and family over there. So it is very toxic and it is extreme.
Toxic extremism. It's not very common in Europe to hear people arguing about politics, blaming unrelated issues on opposing political parties or specific politicians. It's just something you don't really hear that often. Now, that doesn't mean that Europeans aren't political. However, you don't see it tearing apart families based on the president or prime minister that they voted for.
Is that true? Because I can't honestly think that United States is the only country in the world. I know it's not the only country in the world that has a political divide like that. I was wondering in Europe, are other countries experiencing the same thing? I'm not talking about like every aspect of the political system that's happening, because I know that can evolve or devolve into who knows what. But I just mean, like, has it divided family and friends the way that it has in the U.S.?
When I go to family gatherings in Portugal, rarely does politics ever come up. And this is something very polarizing and disappointing in the United States. I can't go anywhere in the United States without somebody blaming something on Biden or Trump. Like they're responsible for everything that's gone wrong in the past 10 years or something.
Yeah.
Now, sure, I have my political beliefs as well, but I usually keep them to myself and don't ruin everybody around them's energy and vibe. Now, in Europe, they have witnessed all of the extreme.
I'll go back to that in a second, but I keep it to myself. I used to, because there was never a need for it to come up. It didn't seem like to me, but I definitely have lost a lot of friends because we think differently politically. So, and obviously, I left the United States, so that could tell you something, I suppose.
On them's energy and vibe. Now, in Europe, they have witnessed all of the extreme political swings, and they are living in a direct result of the aftermath, which is why they are a little bit more hesitant and seasoned when it comes to political matters. If you come from a place in the United States like Detroit or Flint, Michigan, like I do, then safety is a night and day difference here in Europe, especially Portugal, which has been ranked one of the top 10 safest countries in the world. After living in Europe for 2 years, I've been able to let my guard down and not be as paranoid, especially when I'm walking around alleyways at night or going to see a movie or going to a festival. I don't have to worry about the place being shot up.
Right.
It's very sad, but this is a true reality in the United States. And
I've had people who think that I'm like hyperbolic. Is that the right word there? That I'm exaggerating when I say that that's some of the things that I used to worry about that all the time. I mean, I grew up in Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, and tough neighborhood. I've had friends that have been shot in school, killed. I've had, unfortunately, friends that did shooting. I never did. My mom was really strict on me, and I'm grateful for that. But gun violence has definitely been a thing in my life that I've had to have family members, everything. So for me, that was definitely a concern because, I've seen people. I used to work at a gym, and I remember one time I was a manager there, and there was a shooting like across the street, and bullets came flying into the gym. That was far away. The bullets came in there. We had like a crime scene there. I mean, it's crazy. I know that, there's places that are more dangerous than the U.S. in the world, and as it relates to safety, I mean, I'm pretty comfortable here in southern Spain. Now, I'm not going to say everywhere in Spain because there's some high crime areas in Spain, probably in Madrid or Barcelona or something like that. But here in Granada and Malaga, where I was in southern Spain, I mean, I felt okay with, walking at night alone. If Lisa had to walk alone, I wouldn't be as concerned as I would be in the U.S. for sure.
in the USA, wealthy people have moved to the suburbs in gated communities because they fear the inner city's rising crime rates. And I can't help but to think back in times when I lived in Los Angeles where I was robbed at gunpoint, or when I lived in Reno, Nevada and our family house was broken into multiple times. And sometimes it makes me apprehensive to come back to visit the United States. And if you've ever had a gun held to your chest, I'm sure you can sympathize with what I'm talking about. But after being in Europe for a couple of years, there are few places that have violent crimes like the United States. Europe is certainly not a perfect place, and you do have crimes happening here. However, nowhere near the scale of the violent and gun crimes happening in the United States. A place where you can be attacked in the streets for your beliefs. And that concept to most Europeans is completely foreign. Now,
is it? It's completely foreign that you can be attacked in the street for your beliefs in most European countries. Is that? I mean, for somebody like him or me, I would say that it's something you got to keep your eye on. Careful what you say and how you look. I mean, I've had people confront me because they thought I was looking at them funny, but I really wasn't, But I'm just curious. You don't have to worry about that, being attacked for your beliefs.
Streets for your beliefs. And that concept to most Europeans is completely foreign. Now, I know that prejudice exists here in Europe.
Yeah.
However, I have never heard an ethnic or racial slur ever yelled on the streets like I have in the United States. And that should say a lot. All right, now let's talk about the food.
Man, he's really bringing up some stuff here. I guess that's true. I don't know. Is that true? There's going to be 1,000 comments on this video because I'm asking all these questions, but I'm curious. You don't have to worry about racial slurs and stuff like that in the streets. Here in Spain, I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't understand everything completely. So they could be saying, so I've never had any like angry confrontation with anyone. So I don't know. I just don't think that that's a thing here, but maybe it is.
Unless you have the financial means to do so, you are likely paying.
Everybody know how I feel about food. At some point, people are probably going to tell me to just chill out. But hey, I love me some food. So this is a good one right here.
Now let's talk about the food. Unless you have the financial means to do so, you are likely paying 4 times for gourmet foods in the United States, where in Europe, these foods are just the normal. In America, fresh, healthy food is usually sold at a premium where only the richer people can afford it.
See that? Whole Foods, we call that whole paycheck. That's what my wife and I call it, and some friends that we have.
In my opinion, this is a crime against humanity. Here in Europe, they subsidize the agriculture so that it can still be sold at an affordable price. And more than half of the GMOs and chemicals available in United States foods are illegal in Europe. Typically in Europe, teenagers...
Okay, before we get off of the food, I do want to say we have firsthand experience of this right here. Because when we came to visit in 2023, we stayed for like 3 months. When we went home, like we tried to stay as true to Spain as we possibly could. Like we tried to have the same recipes, and because we knew we were going to try to come back. So we would try and walk more often, go to the coffee shop, do all of these things. And it was so expensive to try and eat healthy. Like we would go out and buy some, like fish stock or something like that, where a box that would be €2 here was like $8 in the US. And it was only like 2 types that you could choose from. Or if you wanted to eat organic food, that costs more. I used to sell insurance, and I would talk to people who like health insurance, and I would talk to people who say that, they were sick because, like, I remember talking to one lady who was sick because she couldn't afford to eat healthy. So all she ate was like unhealthy junk food for like a year. And she got diabetes and she got all this stuff. And that's what happens over there. You can't afford to eat healthy. You have to have, a pretty high income. Whereas here in Spain, for example, like it costs more to eat unhealthy. So if you were to buy like something that is an American brand or something like that, it costs more. But you can buy fruits and vegetables and, things like that it doesn't cost much. So that's a huge deal. Education. Oh God, here we go. Oh God.
Speak multiple different languages. They're well versed in fine arts and music. And they understand world geography. Generally just much more cultured than what I see typically in the United States. I mean, when I first came to Europe when I was 21-year-olds, I had 17-year-olds playing me Mozart and Bach and painting incredible paintings and speaking 4 different languages to me. And I realized that, wow, I am not cultured at all. And I think a big part of this is attributed to the education. All over Europe, schooling is free. And some of the best universities are even free. Students here can focus on their passions And if
Right.
they don't like what they're gotten into, they can switch it without being in this massive mountain of debt like in the United States. Students in Europe can focus on their passions, and if they made the wrong decision and don't like the career path they're taking, they're not in mountains of debt like they are in the United States.
Yeah.
They don't have this strong pressure to continue to pursue something they don't want to do. And I think this is really important. Some countries in Europe even allow you to go into a specific trade of choice to be able to follow your passion and not have to learn all of this useless knowledge that has nothing to do with your career path. I know many people.
Wow. Well, yeah, that is true. It costs a lot of money to go to school in the U.S. I mean, when I went to college a long time ago, it was like $20,000 a year. And we didn't have a lot of money, so that was a struggle. And there were a lot of people who, they go to college based on how much money they can make. In some cases, just so they can pay back their loans. I had a really good friend who was an engineering major because they would make more money, and it was just so he can he was kind of forced to by his mother so he could, pay her back. But, in a nice way. They're great people. But, that's a real thing over there. And I think it's true what he's saying, that a lot of people in the U.S. are not as cultured. There's a variety of reasons. You can't just hop on a train and be in a whole nother country with a whole nother, language and food and culture and everything like that. You can't go do that on a Saturday morning and come back Sunday evening. You can't do that. And then the relationship between the United States and other countries really isn't such that, you kind of learn a lot about those other countries. Like in Europe, a lot of countries rely on each other. So I know just from being here in Spain, what's going on over in Ukraine or all of these places, especially right now, Spain is really on the map because of Pedro Sanchez. Whether or not you agree with him, that's not the point of me bringing that up. But it's just to say that I'm learning here that it matters what happens in all these countries around Spain. So I could see how you can have an interest in learning a lot more about these other countries. So, it's just, and there's a lot of other things, social inequalities, there's so many things that I could go on forever. Like for example, I had a really good friend who, he wasn't that much older than me. I think he probably was in the 60s when he was, going to high school, 60s, 70s, and he lived in a segregated state in Alabama. And he told me stories of black schools, because he's a black person, that had hand-me-down books and their, hand-me-down classroom desk and all of that. And, he played on the basketball team and it snowed where he was. And because he went to a black school, they had they didn't have a gym. So they'd have to practice outside in the snow. Whereas the other schools, the white schools, didn't. So there's all these inequalities that help kind of lead to the lack of education of a lot of people. And I don't know. It is, that's how it is. There's no way around that. And having this channel, I get a lot of comments on, Americans not being bright and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of that's perception, but some of it's reality too.
Including myself, that are afraid to go to the doctor in the United States because of how much it's going to cost. And it's a complete opposite contrast here in Europe, where many of my friends go to the doctor regularly just to get a checkup because they can. And it seems to be encouraged by the doctors.
That's true. Oh my God, I'm sorry I keep pausing it, but this is so true. All this stuff. I already told my story here on this channel of how I was paying $1,000 a month for health insurance with my wife and I. And even though I was paying that, I still had a $25,000 procedure that they considered an elective procedure, so they didn't approve it. So that was another $25,000 I had to pay anyway. But here in Spain, you can go into the pharmacy to get your prescriptions. You need a prescription so that you don't have to talk to a doctor like over the phone to get a refill. But here in Spain, they make you go to see your doctor basically every month or every time you need prescriptions. And and it's so they can give you a prescription, but it's also so they can do checkups and everything. So, and that doesn't cost anything more than what I pay. I do pay into the tax system here. I have a social security number, all of that. So, it would be covered with that, but we use private insurance. So, but if I didn't have private insurance, I could use that. So, and it's not something I have to think about. Like I just go, I don't have a copay. I don't have any of that. I just pay whatever we have to pay for insurance every month, which is like $250 for 4 of us. And then that's it. I do have to pay buy my prescriptions, and my son had to go to the doctor, and he had to get like a crutch. He had to get that. So we had to pay for that, stuff like that. But everything else was no additional fee based on what we were paying.
In Europe, things like blood tests and exams are a fraction of the cost that they are in the United States. For instance, I went to the hospital and needed to have an x-ray done on my finger. And I went, no. How much is that gonna cost? And they said, €1. And I went,
oh my
can you
God.
put my whole body into the x-ray machine then? Just kidding. I don't need any unnecessary radiation exposure.
Yeah, no.
But I don't think that people should be in fear of going to the doctor. And this is the reality for a lot of people in the United States. Currently, I pay a premium healthcare insurance in Portugal for about €85 a month. And that includes just about everything. Whereas a not so good insurance in the United States that I was paying $500 for a month was never accepted anywhere and was a complete hassle to have. So the polarization is pretty crazy in terms of the healthcare here. Now, I will say that the public hospitals tend to get overrun here in Portugal sometimes. But because I have private healthcare insurance, I can use any of the private state-of-the-art hospitals located anywhere in Portugal. And I've been there a couple times, and they're super nice, and I've been really impressed by the facilities. Now, alcoholism certainly exists in Europe, that's for sure. But the drinking culture in the United States is completely different than most of Europe, maybe more similar to Ireland or United Kingdom. A lot of European countries have a long history with wine and beer, and they've developed an art form on when and where and how much to drink. In comparison to the American binge culture, shots. This doesn't really exist in Europe for the...
How does he know that? I know it too. But yeah, I don't. This one I don't have too many stories on because I'm at the age now where if we go out drinking, you're lucky if I drink more than 2 like that, and usually it's 1. So I don't know. I'm past that. So I don't have too many stories on this one. But yeah. Although I will say in Spain, it's mostly beer and wine. He's right. Not too many. Liquor drinks, like mixed drinks. It's not really a thing as much.
Shots. This doesn't really exist in Europe for the most part. In fact, it's very rare to see people taking shots, and if they are, they're these little baby shots that are half of what they are in the United States. I feel like in the United States, it's encouraged to get wasted and get super drunk, and people brag about these experiences. But in Europe, you don't want to be that guy. Don't be that guy stumbling through the streets. They will think you are a complete idiot. Do yourself a favor and don't be that guy. But how I see the United States now is not all negative, and there are some things that I took for granted while growing up there. One of those things is the American dream. Now, a lot of people said that is dead, but I believe the spirit is still very alive and well. The concept of entrepreneurship is not as popular here in Europe as it is in the United States. The United States is a place where people have a dream and they can move that future forward. And I have to credit that optimism for the entrepreneur spirit that I have today. And I never...
That's interesting. So I could see that. So it sounds like he's saying that you don't have like a dream here. Like we called it dream building, where my wife and I would get into a car and just drive around, look at 5-acre lots for sale and then picture a house here. And, or we'd find a car that we wanted to buy and we'd go there at nighttime when nobody was there and go look in the window and we'd do stuff like that. Well, he's kind of making it sound like that's not something that happens here. Is that true?
That optimism for the entrepreneur spirit that I have today. And I never realized how truly American this concept was.
Yeah.
And I would not be where I'm at today without this hustler go-getter mentality.
Right.
And I have to give massive credit to the United States for that. I think a lot of times in Europe, it is this foreign concept to have this grandiose dream where you can live in financial freedom and retire early. But I believe Americans have the spirit of working very, very, very hard to be able to retire and enjoy, a certain amount of your life. Right. However, one of the biggest problems is that people don't end up retiring until 65 in the United States, and most of your life's over. So younger Americans now want to retire at 40 and 35 if they can. And more power to them if they can figure out how to do so. But after painting these generalizations with such a wide brush, it's important to mention that there are countercultures and micro communities all over the United States that also criticize many of the things that I mentioned in this video. There's an America that I love and miss so much. But of course there are—
What? I wish he would say that. Parts of America that he loves and misses so much. I miss my family. I definitely do miss my family. I miss the convenience of knowing the language, being able to just not have to think when I go to the bank or anything. I can do anything, no matter how complicated. I could do it in the United States, and this has nothing to do with the language. I do miss that. I do miss understanding the culture. Although there's a lot of different cultures within the United States, but still. And then some of the traditions like we don't have here, and it's almost like my wife and I were talking. I was kind of saying that we kind of feel a little like cultureless in a way, because when here in Spain, when they celebrate Christmas or those kind of things, like we don't even know how it's supposed to go. And they don't give a crap about, places outside the United States, which I understand. I'm sorry, places outside of Spain. So they don't care about Thanksgiving or what happens on Christmas Day in the U.S. or, the 4th of July. Those things don't mean anything. So I do miss that of just kind of understand the culture part. I don't know.
Yeah. There's an America that I love and miss so much. But of course, there are truths to the stereotypes or else they wouldn't exist. But at the end of the day, honestly, I'm just trying to have an open, fun conversation. And that's one of the beautiful things about living in the free world. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this. Am I just trying to put everybody into a box, or is there so much more nuance to all of this? Either way, I will be continuing to make videos all about Portugal. If this is something—
Well, man, that was an interesting video. I can relate to a lot of that stuff. I don't like to just make a blanket statement or generalization about every part of the U.S. because I still have friends and family there that have the type of mentality that they could totally thrive in Europe or outside of the U.S. But they have lives. My wife and I have always kind of been risk takers, and it's a huge risk that we took to come over here. But not everybody has that in them. So I'm saying that to say I don't like to bash too much on especially the people, because I got a lot of great people over there that do some amazing things in the world. But, I don't know. I definitely don't want to go back to the U.S. I'm doing everything I can to stay here in Spain. We have a visa that we're trying to get renewed. And if that doesn't work out, Portugal, the UK, I don't know, the Netherlands are places that we've looked at. We looked at Germany, but it's super hard to get to be able to live there. So we have some options. But anyway, that was a really good video. I definitely appreciate his perspective. hopefully you liked that video. I would love to see your comments on what you think about some of the things that he was saying and even some of the things that I said. My name's Greg. Thanks for joining me today, and we will catch you on the next video. Peace.